Rory, you've written in the Evening Standard today about some of the stories you've heard regarding knife crime in London. What sort of things have people been telling you while you've been out on the campaign trail?
Well, I think the most striking things that stay with me are mothers who've lost children to knife crime and sitting in their houses, their homes, and watching them share photographs and talk about sons who they adored, who lit up their lives, and who, in a matter of minutes, disappeared from their lives and were killed. I was talking to a mother who was preparing Sunday lunch with her son, and he went around the corner to get a lollipop for his 2-year-old and was stabbed in the chest on the way home. And it's that sense of loss.
Do you get a feeling that Londoners themselves don't feel safe in their city?
I think people do feel that crime is going in the wrong direction. And they're right to feel that. That's not just an illusion. The truth of the matter is that homicide rates in London are now at an 11-year high. They're worse than they've been since 2008. That is not a good situation. And there are other things, crime going up outside primary schools. 13 of the 20 worst cases in the country are now in London. So people are right to be worried, and it needs to be sorted out. So for me, of course, walking, listening, staying with families is about learning from experience, but as a mayoral candidate, it is about addressing it and fixing it.
Okay, but this is not a new problem. What can you do differently that previous mayors have failed to do?
It's very complicated. There are many things you have to do, but the most important thing to address it in the short term, to bring violence down immediately, is to get the policing right. And that is not a magic bullet. That is basically about many, many thousands more police officers on the street, visibly with communities. That's outside primary schools, that's in the estates, that's spending the time really getting to know these communities. Now, behind that, you have to do a lot of other things. You have to do things with communities, with youth clubs, but if you don't get the policing right, you're not going to be able to bring violence down.
So this has to involve Westminster as well, then. What would you be saying to Boris Johnson?
Firstly, deliver on the promise that you made to deliver 6,600 more police officers to the Met. But this isn't about the central government in the end. Yes, it's great to get those more resources, but the mayor is the police and crime commissioner for London. The mayor is in charge of a £3.4 billion budget and over 40,000 police officers and civilians. It's the leadership from the mayor that's going to make the difference here. As in any organisation, leadership from the top is the key.
Are you really prepared to resign if you can't bring those figures down?
Yes, of course I would. Now, this isn't a question of simply a promise. It's a whole attitude to doing work, that if you're serious about what you're doing and you're saying to the public, vote for me because I will reduce knife crime, you have to be prepared to say that if you don't, the public should get rid of you. That's the proper relationship. And I did it with prisons, and what I found in prisons is that it has an electric effect on the organisation because suddenly everybody understands what the target is and what they're working towards, and that sets the priority.
But at what point would you resign? Would it be within the first year as London Mayor? Would you give yourself 2 years?
I think the first thing is to make sure any agreement on that is absolutely as clear and transparent as possible, so nobody thinks you're playing around with the numbers. So I'd like to sit down with police officers, with journalists and others, and come up with a fair analysis of what reducing crime will look like and how people will judge it, so nobody thinks that you're playing around.
The Evening Standard's advocating the public health approach to bringing down violent crime in London. That's the sort of thing that's been seen in places like Glasgow where it's been effective. Is that what you'd like to see?
I think it's a very important bit, and a lot of this came from somebody who I saw in Chicago and saw his work in Chicago. It's a guy called Gary Slutkin, and he's brought this also to other countries. It's been done in Glasgow, it's been done in New York, it's been done in LA. But a public health approach is fine in theory. The key is doing it, and the frustrating thing is that we know how this can be done. The question is getting on with it and doing it. And the core of it, in Glasgow, as it should be in London, is good community policing. Yes, there's a lot of other things around it, understanding why people get drawn into knife crime and providing all the surrounding social, economic security for people. But community policing is at the core of that, and that's what we haven't got right in London.
Do you think you have the backing of the police with that message?
I think I do, particularly of uniformed response officers, community police officers, constables, sergeants who feel on the ground that they're not getting the support, they're not getting the training, they're not getting the priority on this work. The challenge for the police is they're being asked to do 120 different things. Genuinely heroic work, and often terrifying work. They're seeing people dying. They're having to be a combination of counsellors, social workers, in some cases almost soldiers, and they're doing all this day in, day out. But for me, everything begins with the uniformed officer on the street. If you don't get that foundation right, nothing else is going to work.
On that campaign trail, is violence in London the number one issue that you've been hearing about? What other things have people been talking to you?
For me, in the end, you have to have an optimistic message, which is about transforming London, about an extraordinary future for London. Yes, it's a difficult time. It's a difficult time with Brexit, and it's a difficult time in terms of safety and in terms of housing and transport. But you need the optimism. But you're not going to get to that great future unless places are safe. You can't have good businesses, good schools. You can't have a good life in London unless you're safe. So you've got to get the basics right.
How is running a mayoral campaign different to running for Tory leadership, Rory?
Well, it's completely different because everything focuses on the place. So for me, instead of being in offices, I am mostly out on the streets. I'm staying with people, I'm eating with people, I'm walking with people. I've spent most of the last 4 or 5 days around Lambeth in different parts of this big borough, nearly 7 miles long. And I suppose I've probably had 40 or 50 in-depth conversations with different people, and that includes people who have themselves committed crime and been to prison, or mothers who've lost children, or sisters who are coming to terms with it, or police officers who I walk with. All of this is just getting me the feel of things. It's completely different to the way that you think about it as a minister. When I was the Minister for Prisons, I had to force myself to make sure that every week I was in a different prison with prison officers. Otherwise, in government, the danger is you're just buried in paper.
And you're running as an independent. Is it different to not have the backing of a major party behind you? What kind of difference does that make, actually?
Well, the first thing is you're completely free, totally free. So I can criticise Labour, I can criticise the Conservatives. The only thing that I care about is sorting out London. So I can say to Boris Johnson, deliver those 6,600 police officers. You said you're going to do it, we want them now. And I can say to Sadiq Khan, you have not gripped this situation sufficiently. I don't need to be afraid of anybody. And the problem with any political party candidate is they're looking over their shoulder all the time, thinking, I don't want to offend my own party and I want to insult the other party. An independent can be polite when they need to and challenging when they need to.
And come that election, do you really think you'll win?
I believe I can definitely win. And I think that the key way to do this is to make people understand that an independent candidate can really speak for London, and to make people understand the Mayor of London has real power. The Mayor of London has more power than the Mayor of New York. The Mayor of London has this enormous budget, and we need the Mayor to stand up and say, I have this power, I have the money, and this is how I'm going to use it, not to keep making excuses.
Do you think the current and previous London mayors haven't fully used their powers then? And that would include Boris Johnson and Ken Livingstone.
So Ken Livingstone, I think, is a very difficult man, and in some ways a very unpleasant man, and I very much dislike his anti-Semitism. But he was, in many ways, an effective mayor. Much of what was achieved in London was achieved before 2008. And I think one of the problems in London is that we haven't seen people fully using this role, using the money of this role, using the power of this role to really transform this city. It's being done as almost a ceremonial role. People are behaving as though they're a member of the royal family or something, not as though they are a chief executive running a city. I know Mike Bloomberg a little bit, who was the mayor of New York, and what impressed me about him is that he approached it like somebody really running an organization. He has the data on the board. That's how I ran prisons, and I believe that's the way that we can help London.